Hello and welcome to the forecast for 2025. Thanks for joining me today. My name is Jenny Webb. I've been an astrologer for about 20 years. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, so I focus on karma and the evolving soul. The highlight for next year is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is the dissolving of boundaries and rebuilding foundations. A lot of restructuring is going to go on over the next couple of years. So we're going to start off talking about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and then we'll take a look at the economy for next year and what that'll look like even for the rest of the decade. Then we'll discuss retrograde winter and what I mean by that. We have 2 solar eclipses next year, one in Aries, one in Virgo. And then we have the Uranus-Pluto Trine coming up. That begins next year, but these 2 planets will be in a trine aspect over the next several years. And then we'll end our chat with a forecast through each one of the 12 zodiac signs and what the Saturn-Neptune conjunction could mean for you personally. So this is a long chat that we're going to have today. So if you would like to skip ahead to anything or watch it piece by piece, below I have the timestamps for each section. And you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok for daily astrology updates, new and full moons, eclipses, retrogrades. You can learn more about astrology with me on Patreon. You can visit patreon.com or download the app. I have, you can be a free member or the $5 tier, which is early access to the daily videos, exclusive access to bonus content. And the $10 tier is for the Learn Astrology videos, but that gives you access to everything on the platform. My website is jennywebastrology.com, and you can schedule a session with me through Acuity, but you can do that via my website. For general consultations, I do 30, 60, 90-minute sessions, or I have specialty consultations like child chart, past lives, and karma, which seems to be the most popular. Career guidance, vocational analysis, relationship analysis, solar returns, locational, and electional. And this is my new book, just published, Venus in Love, Navigating Relationships in the Digital Age. It's the first book in the Astrology for Modern Life series. My next book will be on the big 4, the sun, the moon, the rising sign. Everyone knows the big 3, right? But there's a 4th one. It's the nodes. And for evolutionary astrologers, that's really important. But most astrology books will briefly touch on Venus in each zodiac sign with just a paragraph or 2. But Venus in Love goes much deeper. I've devoted 10 to 12 pages per zodiac sign. And it's updated for the digital age. So whether you're navigating love through online dating, texting, or in-person interactions, it's all included, and each sign includes practical tips, reflection questions for self-awareness, advice for partner, celebrity examples, and also examples from many of my clients and social media followers. They gave permission to include some of their experiences. You'll also find detailed descriptions of Venus in the 12 houses and aspects to other planets, including placements like aspect to Chiron, the moon's nodes, the ascendant in midheaven. Some of these are rarely covered in other texts. For example, Venus with Chiron. You don't see that in most other places, but it's in my book. Also, if you don't know how to find your Venus sign, I give instructions in the book on how to do that. And if you buy the book from my website, just include your birthday, time, city, state, and I will tell you what Venus sign you have, and even the house and main aspects. So let's talk about long-term. Pluto went into Aquarius starting in 2023. It's still trying to get established there. It's gone back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn. Jupiter went into Gemini this year, and next year Saturn and Neptune go into Aries, and Uranus will also go into Gemini. And our Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries, because they'll be going into Aries both next summer. 0 degrees of Aries. Do you know what that point is called? It is called the Aries Point. But the Aries Point is also the world axis, and it also includes 0 degrees of Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn as well. This will be our focus for today, because this conjunction, it gives it more strength and more emphasis happening at 0 degrees of Aries. This is a very important point, especially for societal and global events. It puts everything on the global stage. So let's start off with Saturn-Neptune. Saturn is one of the social planets. Jupiter and Saturn both are social planets. They govern society, and Saturn is the structure of society, enforcement of law. Jupiter is the law and creation of law, and Saturn is the enforcement. Neptune is a transpersonal or generational planet, and Neptune governs much of what we can't see. Our soul, spirit guides, energy, vibration, spiritual bonds. If you're interested in learning more about the planets, I do have a video about the planets. It's an hour plus long, and that's on the $10 a month learning tier on Patreon. So Saturn is contraction and structure, and Neptune is spirituality and imagination and ideals. And together these represent a restructuring of our ideals that will occur throughout each Saturn-Neptune cycle. The cycle lasts around 35 years, I think. When I go through the 2025 forecast by zodiac sign at the end of the video, I'll give more insight into which area of life this will affect for your sun sign. So what does it mean when planets are conjunct? When two planets come together in a conjunction, it operates similarly to a new moon, representing the beginning of a cycle. Just as a new moon forms when the sun and the moon are conjunct, a conjunction between any two planets marks a fresh new phase, setting intentions that will unfold throughout the length of a cycle. After a new moon, the lunar cycle is about 28 days. But any two planets can have a similar cycle. And here for Saturn, Neptune, their cycle is about 35 years. And the cycle will last until the next alignment. So a conjunction is just a beginning, and we do see key developments at specific points in the cycle. So after a new moon, we'll see like challenges at the first quarter moon. We see a climax at the full moon. So here for Saturn-Neptune, Saturn moves faster than Neptune, just like the moon moves faster than the sun. So Saturn will move forward and eventually form a 90-degree square to Neptune. So that's kind of like a first quarter moon. And then here in about 15, 16 years, Saturn will come to oppose Neptune. That's like a full moon. That'll be the climax, or the full expression of that cycle, where the themes set at the conjunction will reach their peak. For Saturn and Neptune, this opposition will take place in the year 2042, likely marking a period of profound clarity and revelation tied to their initial fusion. And I will mention an example of that in the Saturn-Neptune conjunction that occurred in Libra around 1952. And what happened at the end of the cycle, the next Saturn-Neptune conjunction around 1989. It's a really interesting example. So here I'm combining the two. I mean, to fully understand a conjunction, think of it as the fusion or the marriage between two planets, that they fuse, they're attached, and they become a new thing. And here Saturn represents structure, reality, discipline, everything that we can see, touch, taste. It joins with Neptune, the planet of ideals, spirituality, dissolving boundaries. And together they create a powerful team that influences how we shape society structures. It'll allow us to take our spiritual vision and work to bring it into form. We're asked to structure our world according to the values that we hold dear. I'll say that again. We can take our spiritual ideals, Neptune, bring them into form, Saturn, structuring our lives and society around that higher vision. And this is about imagining a better world and doing the work to create something tangible from that. And to do this, we need to be clear about reality versus illusion. So instead of relying on opinions, we should look to facts, data, and repeating patterns even. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to look back at a few past conjunctions and what happened, because themes tend to repeat, and not exact events, but overall patterns tend to emerge. Mythology is a valuable tool because it reminds us of recurring archetypes and predictable behaviors that have existed across time. And these stories don't just show the problems, though they do offer solutions if we're willing to look. Here's a fun example of those Neptune-Saturn conjunction in Libra in 1953. Lucille Ball, if you've heard of Lucille Ball, she had a TV show, I Love Lucy. And in 1953, she gave birth both in real life and on the show, I Love Lucy. She coordinated the births to make fiction and reality align. And this example is a fascinating blend of the imaginary and the real. And I think it's a really great illustration of the combination of Saturn-Neptune's energies. And what's more interesting is her child was born with the combination of these energies, Saturn and Neptune. So let's try to understand what this, let's go a little deeper on what this fusion between these two planets can really mean, and what we could see in our lives personally and on a societal level. We're entering a time where reality and illusions collide, and Saturn's influence on reality and structure and limitation, it will get softened by Neptune, because Neptune governs spiritual dimensions, but also ego dissolution. And during this period, many people could feel a heightened sense of uncertainty, or even like a free-floating anxiety. I think now that Saturn has gone direct, it's now moving toward Neptune. They're both in late Pisces, and we're already starting to feel this. Things may seem worse than they really are, so keep that in mind. That's pretty typical of Saturn-Neptune hard aspects and conjunctions. Saturn represents boundaries, and Neptune is the dissolving of boundaries. So boundaries between nations will become a strong issue, even more so than they have been in the recent past, and also boundaries between neighbors. I didn't include this in the talk, otherwise we'd have been here for hours, but I did look back to, I think it was the 1740s, there was a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and back then there was trade war. And so I think that this combination could have an effect on trade and possible trade wars between countries, but definitely issues with boundaries between countries. Where are the boundaries drawn, and also maybe one country trying to expand their boundaries out. Self-confidence and self-esteem tend to be lower, as this aspect brings a heightened awareness of flaws and limitations. This is a time when self-doubt and disorientation can creep in, especially if you have a Saturn-Neptune issue in your natal chart. If you have them conjunct, if you were born around 1953, 1989, you have them conjunct, or if you were born with Saturn, Neptune in an opposition or square. If you have any issues with that, maybe family issues, family of origin, and growing up, and self-esteem issues because of that, or confusion due to your particular family structure, maybe that caused some confusion growing up and developing, that could come out now because you're naturally attuned to Saturn, Neptune. But this could lead to seeing all the imperfections in yourself or in the world around you. This combination is also a call to monitor your health closely. Saturn-Neptune periods may bring a hidden illness, like an illness that was hidden for a long time comes to the surface, or an illness or a chronic issue could develop during this time and remain undiagnosed, especially for the time when both these planets were in Pisces. But back to the health issues, this is a great time to see your doctor, get checkups, and get any recommended, blood work or procedures by your doctor, any kind of routine things. Make sure you keep up with that. It's really important during this time, especially if you're Aries, Libra, Capricorn or Cancer, if you have placements, especially the sun sign and the early degrees of those signs, you're going to be wanting to work with a doctor and make sure that you're healthy. Stress management is important too. But the period when both of these planets are in Pisces, this period encourages a shift to spiritual pursuits versus focusing on material goals. It's often best to avoid big decisions or commitments and wait for this conjunction's influence to pass before solidifying major plans. And you might think, well, they're fused, and Saturn's material goals and Neptune is spiritual, but I think while they're in Pisces, the spiritual is more heavily weighted, and the outermost planet involved in any conjunction or stellium is the one that's more powerful in that situation and can kind of overtake, I don't want to say overtake the previous one. That's probably not the best way to say it, but you know, first what happens is the original structure, some structure in your life will melt down. Neptune will melt down that structure. And eventually you have the opportunity to rebuild a new structure in its place based on your ideals. But I think that initially to focus on the material world might not behoove us, because that structure could possibly melt down. So you kind of have to let that melt down first before moving forward. Now, the positive and negative manifestations. Let's start with the positive. Or if you want to look at it as like the light and shadow sides, because everything in astrology has a higher goal and a possible shadow that can come out. Because this will challenge our perception of reality, but it will also offer us a chance for profound spiritual insight, especially while they're both in Pisces. So this conjunction can act as a prelude to enlightenment or a period of spiritual growth where we discover a new perspective on life. It encourages us to let go of material preoccupations, especially in the beginning, and focus on higher ideals first. And this can be a time of resilience if we focus on self-care, reduce stress, and create comforting environments for ourselves so that we can heal. There are challenges to navigate as well. Neptune's influence can cloud Saturn's sense of structure. This can lead to confusion, depression, or even desperation. Reality can feel distorted, bringing feelings of anxiety, disorientation, and hidden fears that arise unexpectedly. So that's why I said, especially in the beginning, try not to focus too much on the material world, because things are changing. And when you focus on the material world and things are melting down, or they seem distorted, or something in your life is passing, you might feel like there's nothing you can hold on to, and that feeling of disorientation could increase dramatically. And so what I recommend in the beginning is to find your spiritual footing and your spiritual center and your strength in here, and rely on that, keeping your feet on solid spiritual ground and connecting with other people in your communities. That will help too. That'll give you something to hold on to. It's often best to limit exposure to stress or even difficult individuals during this time, as stress can worsen the effects. Health issues could emerge. We talked about that. Or a chronic issue could remain hidden. So make sure you get your checkups. And again, that's especially true for people with the sun sign or the rising sign in the first 15 degrees of Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. But really, if you have sun or rising sign in any degree of those signs, you're going to want to take extra care and to be cautious. Because even if you have one of those two placements in the later degrees, like 15 degrees to 29, eventually Saturn's going to get there in 2026 to that area. And we want to be more careful when Saturn's around our sun sign, affecting our sun sign, or affecting our rising sign, with or without Neptune. So while this conjunction will bring challenges, it also encourages us to find resilience and redefined understanding of our reality. This will pave the way for growth beyond material concerns. So now let's discuss some of the history of the Saturn-Neptune cycle. Again, I have the timestamps below, so if you're not super interested in the history, uh, skip forward. I won't mind, and you know what? I'll never know. But for those of you interested in the history and repeating patterns, let's go back to the last Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which was 1989 to 1991. I think the conjunction occurred in 1989, but we saw the effects of that pretty strongly over the next 2 years. We saw powerful shifts in global structures and ideologies, bringing about powerful social change. The first thing that came to my mind was, 1989. I think that's when the Berlin Wall fell. And I looked it up online, and surely enough, it was. I was about 10 years old. I was in 4th grade, and I remember talking about it in class. And that symbolized the reunification of Germany, and it was a broader shift away from division. I think the wall went right through the middle of Berlin, right down the middle, splitting in. We had East and West Berlin, and I remember that wall came down. Around the same time, we had the Tiananmen Square protest, and students rallied for freedom, but that movement was tragically suppressed. We had the revolutions of 1989, so it wasn't just Berlin Wall. We saw the collapse of communist regimes across Eastern Europe. By 1991, we saw the breakup of Yugoslavia. Oh, wait, 1991 was the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and then the breakup of Yugoslavia was in 1990. So this conjunction theme highlights a collective restructuring of societies based on new ideals, and that's a theme that we may see returning over the next couple of years. And the dissolution of the Soviet Union, that was actually not just due to this conjunction, but it was due also to the completion of the previous Saturn-Neptune cycle, because the previous cycle began around 1952, 1953, and that's when the Red Scare came in. I'll get to that. And I'd like to point out that as we move forward, we may see echoes of these past shifts, not strictly as unification or dissolution, but as profound change. Old structures may fall while new ones emerge, reflecting a broader cycle of transformation that will redefine boundaries and relationships on many levels. Now, this conjunction also marked the dawn of a digital era, because alongside Saturn and Neptune, as you can see here on the slide, Uranus was right there, the planet associated with technology and innovation. So in 1990, we had the launch of the Hubble Space Telescope, which allowed humanity to explore the cosmos on an entirely new level. And at the same time, we had the creation of the first web server, and that marked the beginnings of the internet age, a shift as transformative as any political revolution. By 1992, we had the development of the first smartphone, sending the first SMS text. In December 1992, that's when the first text was sent, and it said Merry Christmas. And that began shaping the way that we communicate today. This period laid the groundwork for digital transformation that reached its peak around 2007 during the Saturn-Neptune opposition. Remember, that's like the full moon. And 2007 was the launch of the first iPhone. And that's when people started buying smartphones. And remember, I said the opposition was like a peak for what developed during the conjunction, like a full moon. So we went from the first text at the Saturn-Neptune conjunction to the first iPhone about 15 years later. It's pretty cool. And this was due to the influence of Uranus in Capricorn as well. I'm going to go back to 1952. I won't go back any further. Like I said, otherwise this would be like 8 hours long, because I'm pretty detailed. But I may give throughout next year, I may give more examples of these conjunctions as we continue to go deeper. But in 1952, 1953, this was at 22 degrees of Libra. In 1952, we had the death of King George the Sixth, I think, and that led to the coronation of his daughter Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth II. And it was a notable shift as it introduced a female leader into a predominantly male lineage, representing a new structure for the British monarchy. I think that less than 15% of the kings and queens of England were queens, were female. Now, I'm not sure the exact number. I've seen different people have given different numbers, but just off the top of my head, I mean, feel free to drop in the comments if you know, but there's like 30, 40, 50, maybe. One website I went to said there's 60 kings. I just looked this up very briefly earlier. There were tens of kings, but the number of queens was under the number of 10. So on one website I counted 4, and there was another website they named 8. So I think there might have been 8 queens, but it's predominantly male lineage. So for a female leader at this time, it did represent a new structure there. In the United States, the Supreme Court ruled against President Truman. He attempted to seize steel mills under his war powers, and this decision underscored the role of law and limits on executive power. Remember, Jupiter rules over law, but Saturn rules over the enforcement of law. So here he overstepped, and the Supreme Court stepped in and said, no, you can't do that. I think that what happened, he wasn't just trying to seize them for, his own benefit or the benefit of the government. I think what happened was that the steel mills were by law required to pay their employees a minimum rate. Don't quote me on this, but I think that's what happened. And they were not complying with that. They were not paying their employees what they were supposed to. And I think that that's why he attempted to seize them and was trying to take over, but the Supreme Court ruled against him. Also around this time, Congress introduced new immigration quotas, imposing the most restrictive policy in American history to date. Or up to that date of 1952-53. The law did prioritize any immigrants who had technical training, but the response was rooted in the fear of foreign influence, especially communism. Remember, the Red Scare began around this time. And the Red Scare did fuel the McCarran-Walter Act, which restricted immigration. So that was the act, was the McCarran-Walter Act. Now, the death of Stalin led to a shift in Soviet leadership, and that transition resulted in the elimination of some of Stalin's most oppressive policies. So we see this new structure in the Soviet Union. It is one that we would see unravel by the end of the Saturn-Neptune cycle in 1991 with the dissolution of USSR. So that's what I was referring to before, is under the beginning of this Neptune-Saturn cycle was the Red Scare. I think Truman made an announcement around this time about why we should be protecting ourselves against communism and communist influence and coming into our country. And we had the Cold War and the mounting arms race, and then we see the dissolution of the USSR by the end of the cycle in 1991 when we had just begun a new cycle. So I mean, it's interesting to see those things play out over a cycle, a beginning and an end of sorts. I think it was 1953, Truman announced in a State of the Union address the hydrogen bomb. We were able to make a hydrogen bomb. And that amplified global tensions and introduced a new frontier in the quest for security and protection. Saturn is security, and Neptune represents a boundless reach for that security. So the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is on the Aries Point, also known as the world axis, and that holds significant implications personally and globally. If you have any placements on the world axis, specifically at 0 degrees of Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, this is a very important time in your life, especially beginning in 2025. It's a very sensitive degree. It's believed to affect collective events and global themes. And we see that over and over again throughout history. Now, the conjunction won't technically be exact. They won't be exactly at the same place until 2026, but goodness, will they be close next year. They'll be close in Pisces for a little bit, and then they'll both hop in Aries and be within 1 degree of each other. So next year we'll see strong effects for certain. Now, Saturn did station direct in Pisces on November 15th, 2024, so very recently. It stationed at 12 degrees of Pisces. So now we're going to see the build up to the conjunction as Saturn moves forward again, and we'll get very close to Neptune before its next retrograde next summer. I think we'll see these developments in 3 phases. And the signs that I put here on the slide are the ones most strongly affected, especially the early degrees of these signs. Of course, Aries, and also Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. But and I think those 4 signs will be the ones that have the strongest challenges. I think that Leo and Sagittarius, that energy is going to be flowing a little bit more smoothly for those signs. Phase 1, both planets in the last 10 degrees of Pisces. That's February and March of 2025. June of next year is phase 2. It's May 25th through July 3rd. Both planets will be direct motion. They will both be in early Aries within about 1 degree of each other. And then February 20th, 2026, that's phase 3. That's where we see the exact conjunction at 0 degrees, 44 minutes Aries. I think that's minutes. It's 1 tick mark for minutes and 2 for seconds, right? Or do I have that backward? You know what I mean, right? So Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, that's the first phase. We'll see that February of March 2025 as they move within 10 degrees of each other in the final degrees of Pisces. So while not a full conjunction, this close approach initiates a powerful phase of dreaming and reflection. Pisces is a sign of intuition, spirituality, and imagination. And this is a time to let ourselves envision a new world. It's a period of melting down outdated structures, both in our inner lives and society, to prepare for something new. This can be a time of confusion or even fear, though, where we may feel ungrounded as old frameworks dissolve. Mars will be retrograde around this time, along with Mercury and Venus. So I call that the retrograde winter, and we will be talking about that very soon. And so therefore, because of all these retrogrades, and it's essential to embrace this as a time to dream. It's a time to reflect. We're called to imagine the world we would like to see, one aligned with our highest ideals. The Saturn-Neptune pairing in Pisces encourages us to trust in the power of vision. Even when things feel uncertain, knowing that what we dream now will set the foundation for future action. Now, when they go into Aries, this will be next summer, so summer of 2025, we shift from dreaming to doing. Aries is the warrior, calls for action, and this conjunction propels us to fight for what we think is right. No longer will these two be in the nebulous waters of Pisces. We're now in the bold, fire-driven energy of Aries. This phase is marked by a drive to act on our ideals. Aries is the soldier. He is quick to recognize differences, to take a side, and to operate on impulse. Where Pisces was ego-less and about surrender, Aries is all about ego, bold, assertive, individualistic. And this period may bring challenges as egos can become more pronounced and conflicts could arise as people take strong stands. Now, while the Pisces phase invited us to dream of unity, the Aries phase asked us to put those ideals into practice. So it's time to take action to assert our individuality and to actively build the new structures that the Pisces alignment only envisioned. And this transition reflects the full spectrum of Saturn-Neptune energy, from envisioning a new world to fighting to make it a reality. Now, I think, speaking ideally, I think that dreaming of unity and then fighting for a way to bring that into form, I think that would be the ideal, if we could resist the temptation to take sides and be divisive and focus on differences. I think to see the differences but accept them. And I have a quote at the end about that. In my mind, my personal opinion, that would be the ideal. The Saturn-Neptune influence can bring a restructuring of the economy, and while this may be a challenging period, it can also set the stage for new economic foundations. So let's set aside Saturn-Neptune for a minute and talk about the economy and some other cycles that are going on, either beginning or peaking during this time in the second half of the decade. There is a pattern with the stock market highs and lows under Republican presidents, especially since the year 1900. This was discussed by the financial astrologer Ray Merriman. He said that all-time market highs have consistently occurred during Republican terms, while major crashes and lows have also aligned with Republicans. So the stock market extremes do occur under Republican administrations, and we are transitioning to one again. So looking ahead using astrological cycles, we are due for another downturn. Not necessarily saying because we have a Republican president, but there's another cycle I'm looking at, and I'll mention here in a minute. So we're due for another downturn with the possibility of a market crash followed by an economic recession or even depression, but I think that's probably a stretch. I think it's probably just recession. We have an economic low. The low of the economy will be between 2029 and 2031. So here in 5 to 7 years at the end of the decade. This is based on the McWhorter theory. It's an 18-year nodal cycle, first identified by Lois McWhorter many, many years ago. It's one of the most famous of astrological economic theories, and these cycles have been studied thoroughly by astrologers for many, many years. It's one that predicts with very high accuracy over and over and over again, so it's the most important one to pay attention to. The probability of recession is very, very high at the end of the decade. So it's also worth noting that economy and stock market are different, right? So stock markets typically bottom out ahead of a full economic downturn. If you go back to 2008, 2009, 2008, around like August or September, we got some really terrible news about the economy, specifically loans and bad loans going out. And the stock market took a turn, and it took, I think, less than 9 months to go from a high to a low. I think the stock market started falling in late 2008, and we bottomed out in March of 2009. But the economy continued to suffer for another couple of years. So that's actually a really good example there of that. So a stock market low could be approaching, but it may occur well before we experience the full impact of an economic recession. And the economic recession and the low is much easier to predict than a stock market high and low, especially now because people don't have to go through brokers anymore. You can get online and buy and sell very, very quickly. Anybody here can do it. So I'll get to my point here. I gave a talk in 2019. It was November 2019. I wasn't doing much online then, but I gave a live lecture in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I warned of difficulty at that time. And I said, the third week of February of next year, something with worldwide impact. And I remember very clearly saying, number one, take care of your health. Number two, pad your wallet, meaning save your money. It's an old term. save your money and be careful with spending. You may want to pull back for a little bit. So I'm going to say that again. Take care of your health, pad your wallet, save your money. The probability of recession here is very high. I think that there's issues with the economy that screams out more to me than necessarily like health issues. This is a completely different cycle than what we had going on 5 years ago. So, but Saturn and Neptune are associated with health concerns. And I think that those health concerns, my guess is they may start coming about because of environmental issues. And so we need to be careful there. Whether it's heat and drought, or whether it's clean air, or those issues could really start coming to the forefront, I guess. But going forward right now, probability of recession is very high over the next 5 years. Serious health concerns could be possible. So take care of your health. Don't overspend. Do you really need that fancy new car right now? Maybe your job's going great and you're wanting that car, or you want to splurge on your dream home. It's risky. I'll just say it's risky. Do you want to take that kind of financial risk at this point? If it's the opportunity of a lifetime, you feel pretty safe and secure in your job, just use your best judgment. But for me and my family, we're not taking unnecessary risk. We are pulling back on our spending because you just don't know what will happen. And I know probabilities using astrological data, and I live my life by that because it works over and over again. I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't just get on here and do a bunch of fear mongering. I've watched these things play out, and I've studied history when I'm looking at specific cycles, and astrology has proved itself to me as a very valuable tool. And so I really like that saying, better to be safe than sorry. We do have some good things coming in that are very, very helpful with the Saturn-Neptune cycle. And so when I get to the discussion about Uranus and Pluto, that will help lift your spirit. So do not despair. And I know on this next slide, it says retrograde winter. So at this point, you're probably wanting to take a break from the slides. But just know, as I get toward the end and we talk about Pluto and Uranus, there's so much good energy coming in. It's so helpful, and it's revolutionary, and it's exciting. So do not despair. And retrograde winter sounds bad, but it'll help us process things. It's really going to help us get going with Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces, and doing the dreaming and the reflection. So we need this. Let's start with Mars retrograde. On December 6th, Mars will station retrograde, and it will initiate a period of stalled action. Things coming to a halt, and that will last until February 23rd, although we will start to see some movement forward around January 15th. So it won't be stalled the entire period. But at this time, on December 6th, whatever was moving forward at a decent pace will halt or slow down. There will be issues to clear up before moving forward. If you're familiar with your astrology chart and transits, just look to where Mars is retrograding through. The late degrees of Capricorn, 20 to 29, Cancer. The late degrees of Cancer, 20 to 29 degrees of Cancer, or 0 to 6 degrees of Leo. I have Mars in my chart natally at 7 degrees of Leo, so Mars will station retrograde right on within about a degree of my natal Mars. So there's a new beginning for me. I'll see the hint of it in December, and then I gotta wait for it to start again, probably till April. So there will be some issues to clear up or things to work out before moving forward. The delay is necessary. Just keep that in mind. As Mars goes retrograde, it finds itself opposite Venus and Pluto. If you look here at the chart, opposite that Mars in Leo, and here in the chart it's in the second house, but it's opposite Venus in Capricorn, Pluto in Aquarius, and even Ceres in Capricorn. It will amplify some tension here, creating a highly charged emotional atmosphere, because at the time it goes stations retrograde, the moon will be in late Aquarius. So it's not a close opposition, but it's opposite by sign. Adding to this intensity, we have the Sun and Mercury in Sagittarius, if you want to look at the 6th house in the chart. And those two placements are opposite Jupiter, and they both square Saturn up on the midheaven in this chart, right at the end of the 9th house. This is a bit more intermediate astrology, but this creates a T-square with Saturn, and Saturn is what I refer to as the driver. So Saturn's is in control there, and Saturn is a planet that, and we discussed Saturn, it represents constructive limits, but it can also feel like a block on progress. You know, Jupiter is our optimism, Mercury is our planning. Here, Mercury is already retrograde on this day, so Saturn represents a block. So we have that going on at the same time, even though it's not directly connected to Mars retrograde. And with both Mars and Saturn blocking energy flow like this, people may experience a sudden halt in areas where things were moving smoothly just a few weeks prior. This abrupt slowdown will likely cause frustration as efforts and momentum feel stalled. Just know that it's coming. Sometimes I just like knowing that it's expected. You know, I'm discussing a transition here with my career and maybe launching something new, but I'm just talking and throwing some ideas in the air. I'm not taking any steps forward with this particular plan yet, because I know retrograde winter is coming. I'm calling it retrograde winter because Mars and Mercury and Venus will all be, you know, retrograde over the winter at different times, so some of them overlapping. So it's best just to expect that things may not move forward. We need lots of extra time here. But for many people, this energy might feel like a pressure cooker. That's what Mars retrograde can feel like. While some people may struggle to hold back their frustration, others might feel compelled to keep their reactions under control. Mercury is also retrograde. That adds another layer of restriction, especially in how we communicate. This period is well suited for quiet reflection rather than impulsive actions or attempts to push forward. And impulsive behavior during this time, not advised. Take your time with things. You need patience, because impulsiveness will lead to frustrations and misunderstandings. This is a moment to slow down, reflect, and find inspiration in stillness, especially the first half of the retrograde, which is December 6th through January 15th. Around January 15th, something will come to the surface. You'll know how you really feel. And then after that, you can make plans to move forward. Now, on February 23rd, Mars will station direct and will end its retrograde at 17 degrees of Cancer. And as Mars shifts direct, it forms a harmonious water trine with Saturn and Mercury in Pisces and Vesta in Scorpio. So that triangle's marked here on the chart. And this will usher in a phase of newfound stability. This water trine brings reasonable thinking, patience, sustained energy. Saturn brings that patience. And Saturn, positive combination, like a trine between Saturn and Mars, brings sustained energy, managing our energy levels well, so that we don't have burnout. This is a positive shift from the chaos and tension that may be defining the earlier phases of this retrograde. During a Mars retrograde, it's common to see cycles of like anger, where anger's been under the surface, you've been holding back, and then experiencing a sudden exhausting outburst, which I think mid-January is when we're most likely to see that this time around. But as Mars stations direct, there's an opportunity to better understand how to manage our energy without arguments or just falling into that cycle of work hard burnout. So we might be seeing some anger outbursts in middle to end of January, but I think that as we get to the end of February, this is a stabilizing effect here that I think will be very beneficial. People will calm down as we get into February. And there may still be challenges in relationships, though, by the end of the cycle, especially romantic ones, because Mars will be square to Venus and Chiron in Aries, and that square will stay because Mars has slowed down to station direct. So Mars was moving backward, and as a planet moves backward and goes to change direction, it slows down and looks like it stops before it starts to move forward again. And that time around when it's changing direction, the planet looks like it's just sitting in the same spot for a long time. Well, Venus is slowing down. Venus has moved forward, and Venus has slowed down to station retrograde. Venus will go retrograde March 1st, 7 days after this. So Mars has slowed down, Venus has slowed down. They're going to be in a square, as you see here. They'll be in a square for a long time. So that will affect relationships and even money issues, especially household finances, but because of this particular alignment. But there could be unresolved issues or vulnerabilities in relationships. The key to navigating this, though, this tension is through honesty, speaking openly, especially about how you feel, because Mars is in Cancer, Venus is in Aries, and listening to others and being a good listener or responding to their concerns and letting someone else know that you've heard them. Because around this time, you will want to be heard, but just know that the other person wants to be heard too. Drama or outbursts in relationships won't serve anyone here, but a sincere, clear conversation can lead to healing and greater connection because Venus is in close proximity to Chiron. They'll be in the same sign. So there's healing available throughout Venus retrograde cycle. But as Mars completes its retrograde cycle, we're still on Mars, haven't even got to Venus yet, we can find renewed strength to move forward with balanced energy and a more stable foundation. So let's move on to Venus. She'll align with Chiron and the moon, which is what we just talked about, forming a square to Mars and creating a very dynamic chart, strong emotional undertones, and continuing this theme of retrograde winter. The primary theme here is emotional healing with her alignment with the moon at this time. There will be emotional healing to look forward to, especially for those looking to mend past relationship wounds or address any unresolved issues in a current partnership. Venus conjunct Chiron can bring up past hurts, but it also offers an opportunity for transformative healing. But the square to Mars means that we might face some friction, because a square is friction, or some tension in relationships, particularly around themes of independence versus closeness. For those of you familiar with deeper astrological layers, Venus and Mars aren't in mutual reception here, if you know what mutual reception is. But they do share an interesting energetic relationship here, because Venus is in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars. And if we look at Mars, Mars is in Cancer. Now, if they were in mutual reception, Mars would be in Libra or Taurus. But here Mars is in Cancer, ruled by the moon. The moon is conjunct Venus, linking these energies in a subtle way, but very potent. And this connection intensifies the Venus-Mars square. Actually, the moon and Mars are in mutual reception here, so that'll strengthen. I don't know why I didn't notice that before when I was looking at this, but the moon is in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars, so we look at Mars. Mars is in Cancer. The moon rules over Cancer, so we look at the moon. That's called mutual reception, but the moon being next to Venus on that day pulls Venus in a little bit to this dynamic. So that's just kind of like a special energy flow there. So they are in a square, but they're tied so much more strongly than that. And so it's How do we effectively deal with anger? How do we heal from past anger? Because these are retrograde, so it is about the past. So these are very intimately, very strongly linked. Mars is so much more than anger, but because the moon is emotion, that's the first thing that, an emotional Mars can be an angry Mars, or defensive. Defensive is another, something else that pops into my head, or feeling the need to defend. I guess the moon can be defensive too if it's on a very instinctual level. So that could be a theme that could come up for some people. Mars in Cancer also highlights actions motivated by emotional understanding and a desire to protect or nurture family or close connections. Venus will station direct on April 12th. That will end our winter, even though winter will technically be over by then. That officially ends our retrograde winter. She will be right next to Saturn in Pisces, and she'll be forming a nice easy trine to Mars in Cancer. This will create a beautiful stabilizing end to Venus retrograde and retrograde winter. This shift is especially significant because where Venus began her retrograde in a tense square aspect with Mars, causing tension in romantic relationships, she can now conclude in harmony with both Saturn and Mars. So she's in harmony with Mars. So we see harmony in our relationships, and Saturn is very stabilizing. So this alignment brings groundedness and balance, giving relationships the foundation needed for longevity. So for those of you that are reconnecting with someone during this time, I think this retrograde might be one of the rare occurrences where rekindling a relationship may actually be able to last. I was always told, don't get back together with an ex during Venus retrograde because it'll probably end by the time the retrograde is over. But this might be a time where that's possible, where it could last. But the key to that would be to approach the relationship with a fresh perspective. This isn't about reliving the past, rather it's about building a new way of relating to that person. So the success of any reconnection will depend on both people making changes and establishing new dynamics rather than attempting to recreate the good old days. So there is one caveat there. Venus retrograde isn't typically a time to start new relationships, but this period does offer an exception. If you take things slowly, then by the end of the retrograde, you'll likely have a clearer understanding of where things stand and whether moving forward is wise. April 12th is particularly favorable time for meeting someone new, as Mars brings the physical attraction, but Saturn offers a sense of long-term potential too. So with these energies supporting Venus's transition, it's a powerful moment for forging lasting connections based on stability and mutual growth. So if you're not really wanting to date during a Venus retrograde, if you're like, no, I don't do that, then right at the end of the retrograde, I think there's a nice lineup here where you could get back to dating pretty quickly once her retrograde is over. So our first solar eclipse is at 9 degrees of Aries. It's on March 29th, 2025. Both eclipses next year are partial solar eclipses, so they're not totals. It will be conjunct Mercury retrograde, and Mercury will be at 0 degrees Aries on that day. That's the future position of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So this alignment invites a period of deep mental processing, allowing us to prepare for the themes of Saturn and Neptune as they eventually enter Aries. Aries is high energy, it's courage, it's self-focus. It encourages us to examine our personal identity and take a closer look at our ambitions and our sense of self. This eclipse may feel intense, especially for Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, who are likely to feel a bit of stress during this time. But for Leos and Sagittarians, this energy will bring an extra push of motivation and support. So you're more likely to experience a positive flow of energy at this time. It'll be crucial to focus on reflecting rather than rushing into action. as Mercury's retrograde motion calls for introspection and reviewing past decisions. Venus will still be retrograde during this time, so we're in that winter I talked about. But this eclipse does mark a preparation phase where we're encouraged to explore who we are and envision how we'll adapt to the changes that lie ahead and where we fit into it, because Aries is about identity. And the other interesting thing about Aries isn't just all selfish and about identity. And Aries is concerned about fitting into the larger whole. Aries can follow the leader. I mean, Aries is the soldier. It's just that Aries needs to respect the leader in order to follow. Our next eclipse is at 29 degrees of Virgo on September 21st. The eclipse will be opposite Saturn in Pisces and Neptune in Aries. They'll be really close, but in different signs. So this eclipse aligns with the early stages of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, signaling our first steps toward real dynamic action. This eclipse benefits from a trine to Pluto and Uranus in Gemini. So Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini, even though they're out of sign. Meaning that Pluto and Uranus will be in air signs, but Virgo is an earth sign. But Mercury is direct here. So be coming out of that reflection period and making plans to take action at least. Mercury will be in the air sign of Libra. So even though that eclipse is in Virgo, it's next to Mercury, you can see this triangle in this day, this blue triangle. And it's even forming a kite with Saturn-Neptune. Because Neptune here we have at the midpoint between Pluto and Uranus. See Pluto at 1 degree, Neptune at 0, almost 1 degree, and Uranus at 1. We'll talk about that in a few slides later. But that configuration supports progressive thinking and innovative ideas, especially around humanitarian issues and social transformation. During this period, we'll see the emergence of new revolutionary ideas, though actual action may not be immediate. I think it's going to take a little more time to develop, maybe getting Saturn into, well, Saturn will have been in Aries, I guess. Earlier in the summer, because we see Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus all retrograde here. So even though Saturn's in Pisces, it was in Aries in July and August. But this eclipse does plant seeds for the future where ideas and strategies will eventually take form. So I think the summer will be a time of action, and this may be a time of regrouping for future action, maybe. But we should be mindful on this day of the square between Pluto and Mars. Indicating that any action we take during this time could come with tension. Mars is positioned in Libra, and Libra holds a more pacifist kind of energy. Although Libra is capable of fierce responses when pushed to the limit. You ever seen an upset Libra when they've been holding back for like months or years? Libra wants things to be fair and they want justice. And when they get pushed too far, it's a sight. I don't mean to make fun of Libras. I am one, but it's something to be aware of. But most of the time, I think they're can be pacifist. Depends on what else is going on in their chart. I guess I really don't want to label anyone, but Libra tends to be a softer energy, but it is Mars and Pluto. And so we may experience a mix of intensity and restraint with the potential for both conflict and cooperation. Overall, this eclipse will bring us closer to our ideals, offering our first true sense of hope and potential to shape a new world, at least as far as eclipse dynamics, because the previous eclipse was a bit more about reflection. Let's talk about the Pluto-Uranus trine now. And over the next couple of years, my forecast will focus a little more and more on the Pluto-Uranus trine. First, Uranus does enter Gemini July 7th, and that's what kicks this all off. So let's talk about Uranus in Gemini. Uranus will enter Gemini in 2025 on July 7th, and will stay there until 2033. Well, for the most part, it'll retrograde back into Taurus once or twice, but it won't leave Gemini until 2033. And so we're stepping into a period primed for information revolution. Gemini rules over communication, information exchange, and open-mindedness. It's an ideal sign for Uranus because Uranus thrives on innovation, sudden insight, and revolutionary ideas. The pairing of these two set the stage for breakthroughs in how we gather, interpret, and share information. So you thought that technological advancements were moving really quickly the past few years? That will speed up even more. It'll be really cool, but some of us may have, some difficulty keeping up. Do your best to keep up. Time may feel like it's speeding up too with all these outer planets going into air and fire signs. But with technology at the forefront, we may see new tools and methods to better distinguish fact from fiction. An essential advancement in today's fast-paced digital landscape for sure. Being able to understand, what's been falsified and what's real. I sometimes play around with images on AI, and it's crazy what they can create. I saw someone on Instagram, she said, if I had kids, this is what they would look like. And it was a picture of her, and then she had 4 girls in front of her, and they all looked like her. But it was amazing that we can create those now. The average person can create these images. And so how do we distinguish between what's real and what's not? That's going to be a focus, and we're going to be figuring those things out. It will be, we'll always have to work at it, right? Just like with protecting our accounts and the fraud detection, something we'll always have to keep up with from now on. But this area of open-mindedness inspired by Gemini could also bring about stronger humanitarian efforts. And that's a Uranian thing, as people harness communication platforms to advocate for human rights and push for social reforms and bring awareness to certain things that are going on. We're looking at a period where messages of change are amplified, helping to dismantle outdated structures and establish new forward-thinking systems. We talked about that with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. This time promises to fuel rapid innovation with fresh waves of information, sparking creativity and invention across all fields. It's truly an exciting time, bringing the best of both Gemini's curiosity and Uranus's progressive spirit. See, there couldn't be a better time for Uranus to bring us into this new phase of technological and social growth and its alignment with Pluto and Saturn and Neptune. So I told you, right, just to hang in there. I had some good news. So let's bring Pluto into the mix. So as Uranus enters Gemini, it will trine Pluto, as you can see in the chart up here at the top. Pluto and Uranus will be 120 degrees from each other, so that's called a trine. And halfway in between them, so 60 degrees to the left of Uranus here and 60 degrees to the right of Pluto, sits Saturn and Neptune. So you can see if you look at the blue lines up there. It's a powerful lineup between these planets, and it will foster a period of revolutionary support, especially with Pluto and Uranus involved. That's very revolutionary, and it's very powerful. Especially from 2025 to 2026, but they'll be in a trine to each other all the way up to the middle degrees of air signs, and that'll last several years. So this is going to go on for a while, thank goodness. Uranus represents technological progress, insight, and innovation, and will be in the early degrees of Gemini, where it pairs beautifully with Pluto and Aquarius, which is a sign of transformation, reform, collective empowerment. Uranus rules over Aquarius, so that's another connection there. Together, these planets encourage a shift toward revolutionizing social structures and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Similar things that we talked about with Saturn Neptune. We may have the dissolving of boundaries, but Pluto and Uranus will help us with the rebuilding. They're right there. As soon as Saturn and Neptune get into Aries, they're right there to help, which is fantastic. And we may get something similar to what we saw In 1989, with Saturn and Neptune aligned with Uranus. They were in a conjunction in that time, but they were aligned with Uranus. So here again, I think we're going to see these technological advances. I think that's really, really cool that, this feels like the next stage in a much, much longer cycle, much longer than a 35-year Saturn-Neptune cycle. It's like we started off with the conjunction between Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, and now it's like, okay, here's another conjunction, but Uranus has moved forward 60 degrees, and so it's like this is the next phase here, and so it's 60-degree aspects tend to be very exciting. It's a more immature aspect, so to speak, but it is an exciting one. Trines tend to be more mature, meaning that there's more structure there, whereas with the 60-degree aspects, there's not as much structure. It's still immature, meaning early in the process. So the unique position of Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries occurring at the midpoint, that means the halfway point between Uranus and Pluto. Midpoints are really important in astrology. But this position plays a critical role in this configuration. The midpoint acts as a bridge, okay? And it plays to channel the transformative and rebellious energy of Uranus and Pluto. So Uranus is rebellious, Pluto's transformative. And so that'll be channeled directly into the Saturn-Neptune cycle, creating a conduit for revolutionary ideals, becoming embedded within Saturn's structure and Neptune's vision. These harmonious trines and 60-degree aspects are tremendously helpful, especially as Saturn-Neptune will undoubtedly bring changes and disillusionment and stresses in the beginning. Yet through these difficulties, we'll likely witness the rise of influential humanitarian figures and movements, visionaries who leverage the energy of Uranus and Pluto and push for social reform. This could be an era unlike no other that we've seen in our lifetime, where dissatisfaction with the status quo and unfulfilled promises act as catalyst for deep change, laying the groundwork for a new revolutionary world. How's your attention? Do you need a break? Let's talk about the sun sign forecast. Y'all have hung in there this long for over an hour, huh? Or about an hour. I'm going to go through these in order. If it would make it easy, if you just want to look at your sign, I will go through them in the order of the zodiac. So we'll start with Aries. So it would be Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Sagittarius, Scorpio, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces will be at the end. I always go through them in that order. So for Aries, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction calls for a reimagining of your identity and how you present yourself. It's a great time to explore new styles, so try journaling about your personal goals or even take a solo retreat to reflect on who you are becoming. It's also helpful to set goals that align with your vision. So maybe trying a new hobby that's been calling out to you, or setting a daily mantra that resonates with your future self. This phase is all about shedding old labels and experimenting to what feels most true to you. For Taurus, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is a deep dive into the subconscious mind. It's a time to let go of old patterns and fears that no longer serve you. So try practices like meditation, breath work, or even dream journaling to connect with your inner world. Engage in gentle activities like art therapy or setting up a peaceful corner in your home for reflection that can help you process emotions and create a sanctuary for healing. This is a phase for slowing down and honoring your inner journey, so give yourself permission to pause and release. For Gemini, it's time for a fresh look at friendships, social networks, and your dreams for the future. It's a great time to seek out communities that align with your values, maybe joining a cause or a group that fuels your passion for learning or justice. Try hosting a small gathering with friends to discuss shared goals or volunteer for a local initiative. This phase also invites you to set bold yet practical intentions for the future. So dream big and connect with those who share your vision. For Cancer, this conjunction spotlights career and public image. If you're feeling uncertain about your path, take this time to reflect on what truly fulfills you. So try updating your resume with new skills or take a course in an area that excites you. Consider connecting with a mentor that you find inspiring or schedule a vision board session to map out your career goals. Embrace this as a time to reshape your professional life based on authenticity and purpose. And don't shy away from asking for what you truly want from your career. For Leo, 2025 brings a quest for knowledge and new experiences. This is the perfect time to start a new course, explore a different culture, or dive into philosophy or spiritual studies. Consider reading books on subjects that you're curious about, planning a future travel experience that challenges your perspective. This phase is all about expanding your worldview, so embrace the opportunity to explore and grow, whether it's through online classes, cultural experiences, or finding a mentor who broadens your horizons. For Virgo, next year brings a period of transformation, especially around shared resources and intimacy. This is a great time to declutter, both physically and emotionally. Try organizing your finances, setting boundaries in relationships, or engaging in activities like journaling or therapy to process deeper emotions. You might also explore energy healing or shadow work to release old attachments. Embrace this as a time for personal transformation. And trust that by letting go of what no longer serves you, you're making space for deeper connections and true empowerment. For Libra, next year invites a fresh approach to your relationships. This is a perfect time to revisit what you truly want from your partnerships and make any necessary adjustments. Try having heart-to-heart conversations with loved ones or taking a relationship workshop to improve communication. If you're single, this is a good time to reflect on past relationships and clarify your desires before diving into something new. Focus on creating balanced and authentic connections that align with your core values. And remember that real growth in relationships often come through honest, open dialogue. For Scorpio, health, routine, and daily habits are highlighted. This is a great period to adopt wellness practices such as meditation, mindful eating, or even a new exercise routine. Consider creating a daily schedule that aligns with your physical and emotional needs, or try keeping a health journal to track your progress. Small, consistent changes can lead to lasting results, so embrace this as a time to cultivate habits that support your well-being and create a more fulfilling daily routine. For Sagittarius, next year invites a renewed focus on creativity and joy. So dive into a passion project, whether it's painting, writing. It's a great time to explore artistic hobbies or even start a blog to share your ideas. If you have children, this phase can also deepen your bond with them through creative activities. The key is to let yourself play, explore, and express what makes you unique. This period is about bringing more joy and inspiration into your life, so have fun and let your creativity shine. For Capricorn, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction encourages you to reflect on home, family, and personal foundations. It's a great time for home improvement projects or creating a peaceful space that feels like a sanctuary. Try setting up a family ritual like a weekly dinner or go through old family photos to reconnect with your roots. This phase is all about nurturing your sense of belonging and stability, so focus on creating supportive and comforting environment that feels like home to you. For Aquarius, this conjunction emphasizes communication, learning, and connection. It's an ideal time to take a course, start a a new site on social media to express yourself, or join a book club to share your ideas there. If you've been wanting to write, this is a good phase to put pen to paper. You might also find value in improving your listening skills, perhaps by practicing active listening or learning a new communication technique. This period is about exploring new ways of connecting with others and finding joy in shared knowledge. For Pisces, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction highlights finances, values, and self-worth. It's a great time to review your budget, set financial goals, or clear out items that no longer align with your values. Consider focusing on investments that reflect what you truly care about, whether it's supporting sustainable brands or charitable causes. This phase encourages you to build a strong sense of worth and security by aligning your resources with your deeper values. Embrace this time as an opportunity to redefine what abundance means to you. Now, for the luckiest day of the year next year, June 25th, 2025, the energy starts to come in on June 24th, but on the 25th, there's the new moon. So I think that day's a little bit stronger for new beginnings. So if you wanted to pick one of those 2 days, the 25th would be the day. So take a chance on this day, especially great for Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, Aries, but also Pisces and Scorpio. If you like to gamble, you could buy a lottery ticket on that day, but don't gamble more than you can afford to lose. Or you can start something new, like a new project or goal, side hustle, new relationship, or anything your heart desires. There's also a full new, so I said that, yeah, there's a new moon on that day. So that entire lunar cycle, beginning on this day, it will be lucky, especially for families and parenting, nurturing, gardening, restaurant work, anything in the food industry, or emotional healing. Here's a quote from Audre Lorde, poet and civil rights activist. "It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." I think every year the quote I pick always gets to me. Audre Lorde lived from 1934 until 1992. That's when she passed. She came of age right around the time the Neptune-Saturn conjunction in 1952. And then she passed away at the beginning of the Neptune-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn in the early 90s. She defines herself, and she said this directly, she defines herself and her identity as a Black woman, lesbian, feminist, socialist, poet, mother of two, including a boy who is part of an interracial couple. She married a white gay man in 1962, and she had 2 children with him. This beautiful soul was far ahead of her time. If you're looking for some inspiration, I suggest you read some of her poetry or look her up on YouTube. But I think going into the next couple of years, this quote is something we could all keep in mind, and it's probably one I'll keep on my desktop. So thank you for joining me on this journey through all of these astrological cycles and what we can expect for 2025 and beyond. May this knowledge empower you to navigate change with intention, contributing to a future that aligns with our deepest ideals and shared vision. If you would like to learn more about astrology, join us on Patreon, patreon.com, or you can download the app. You can do a free membership, or you can get on the $5 tier for early access to post or exclusive bonus. Or if you want to get access to everything, including the teaching videos, it is $10 a month. We'd love to see you over there. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for daily updates. Have a great year.